The morning Ethan Cole's life began to unravel was the same morning hope appeared in a form he least expected. Quiet, uninvited, and dressed in an expensive charcoal coat. Minutes before that moment, Ethan stood on the cracked pavement outside the community library where he volunteered, staring at the eviction notice in his hands, the red ink bleeding into his vision like a warning he could no longer avoid. His breath trembled in the icy wind as the truth settled heavily on his chest. He had run out of time. His mother's medical bills, the failing business he had tried to keep alive, the debts he thought he could outrun, all of it had finally cornered him. And as he stood there, his world collapsing piece by piece, he felt something inside him break in a way he feared could never be repaired again. Before the story continues, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of unexpected people to change our lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support brings these stories to more hearts that need them. Ethan had always lived simply, almost invisibly, a quiet man with a worn-out backpack, a gentle smile, and dreams too large for the small world he occupied. After losing his father early, he had become the anchor of the family, working multiple jobs, helping neighbors whenever he could, and volunteering at the library to teach struggling students for free. He believed in giving, even when life refused to give anything back. But giving had its cost, and now that cost stared at him like a cruel reminder of his own limitations. He folded the eviction notice, struggling to swallow the bitterness rising inside him, and forced himself to step inside the library. If nothing else, the kids were waiting. He couldn't let them down, too. Inside, the library smelled of dusty shelves, worn-out books, and the warm familiarity of a place that felt like home. Ethan walked past the tables where he usually tutored struggling teens. Today, though, everything felt different. His movements felt heavier, slower, as if grief had wrapped itself around his bones. He tried to smile at the librarian, Mrs. Collins, but even she could sense the exhaustion in his eyes. She almost stopped him to ask if he was all right, but before she could speak, the front doors opened, and in walked a stranger, tall, refined, and carrying an air of quiet authority. The man's presence changed the atmosphere instantly. His coat was tailored, his shoes polished, his gaze steady yet distant. He didn't look like someone who belonged in a small community library surrounded by worn carpets and flickering lights. And yet, he approached the front desk with a purpose that intrigued everyone in the room. Ethan didn't pay much attention at first, busying himself with arranging textbooks and preparing to help a shy boy who struggled with math. But as the stranger spoke to Mrs. Collins, something in the librarian's expression shifted, curiosity mixed with surprise, and before Ethan could make sense of it, the stranger walked toward him. His steps were slow and deliberate, his eyes observing Ethan with an intensity that made Ethan's heart tighten in his chest. He wondered if he had done something wrong or misplaced something. But when the man finally stood beside him, the words he spoke were calm, almost thoughtful, as he explained that he had been searching for someone, not a tutor, not an employee, but a person whose acts of quiet kindness had been mentioned to him by someone he deeply trusted. Ethan blinked in confusion, unsure how a wealthy stranger could possibly know anything about him. But the man continued, describing how he had heard stories of Ethan staying late to tutor students, visiting elderly neighbors to deliver groceries, helping strangers get job applications filled out, even giving away part of his paychecks when someone else needed it more. Ethan felt exposed, embarrassed even. He had never done any of it for recognition. He did it because it felt right. But hearing it echoed by a stranger stirred something inside him he wasn't prepared for. The man studied Ethan closely before saying he was searching for people who still believed in compassion, sincerity, and genuine effort, qualities he felt the world had forgotten. Then he said something that froze Ethan's breath. Sometimes, a single act of kindness sown quietly might be the seed of something much larger waiting to bloom. Ethan forced a smile, grateful but uneasy. Compliments didn't pay bills. They didn't stop eviction notices. They didn't heal his mother or pull him out of the pit he was sinking into. So he thanked the man politely and tried to return to his work. But the stranger didn't leave. Instead, he stepped closer and asked a question Ethan wasn't ready for. What was weighing on him? There was sincerity in the man's voice, the kind that made Ethan's chest ache, but he couldn't bring himself to open up. People like that man, the wealthy, the powerful, did not understand people like him, so he simply shook his head and said he was fine. The stranger's eyes narrowed slightly, not with irritation, but with the quiet perception of someone who had seen more than most people assumed. Then, without pushing further, he slipped a crisp business card onto the table beside Ethan and walked away. Just before leaving the library, he paused and said that sometimes even the strongest people needed someone to believe in them, even if that someone was a stranger. Ethan exhaled shakily. The card looked expensive, too elegant for someone like him to hold. He tucked it into his pocket without looking at it again. He didn't believe salvation, financial or emotional, came so easily. Life had never given him shortcuts, and he didn't expect it to start now. The rest of the day blurred into a haze of numbers, chalk dust, and forced optimism as Ethan continued helping the students who depended on him. But beneath his calm exterior, the storm continued to rage. When evening approached and the library closed, Ethan stepped into the cold again, the sky painted in fading gold as the sun dipped behind the horizon. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the business card he had forgotten about. His breath caught. The embossed letters spelled a name nearly everyone in the state would recognize: Adrian Hale, the billionaire philanthropist, the investor known for funding community projects and transforming neighborhoods with his foundation. A man surrounded by wealth, cameras, and influence. The last person Ethan expected to cross paths with, let alone be noticed by. His hands trembled slightly as he turned the card over. A handwritten note in elegant cursive said, "Call if you ever need someone to believe in you." Ethan nearly laughed at the absurdity. Why would a billionaire believe in him? A volunteer with no home, no money, and a future rapidly shrinking into darkness. But that night, as Ethan returned to the small apartment he would soon lose, he found himself staring at the card again. The words seemed to glow under the dim light, whispering possibilities he had never allowed himself to imagine. Days passed. Ethan didn't call. Pride, fear, and disbelief tangled inside him like a knot he couldn't untie. Meanwhile, things worsened. His mother's condition declined. His landlord grew impatient. His job cut his hours. And yet, Ethan kept waking up each morning trying to find solutions he knew didn't exist. Every time he held the business card, he felt weaker, because he didn't want charity. He wanted dignity. But fate has a way of pushing us into corners we can't escape without help. When his mother was rushed to the hospital one freezing night, Ethan stood beside her bed, overwhelmed by helplessness. The doctor's words echoed in his ears: immediate surgery, high cost, urgent decisions. His hands shook as he stepped out into the hallway. For the first time in his life, he felt truly defeated. With tears burning his eyes, he reached into his wallet and pulled out the card. For a long moment, he stood frozen, battling the war inside him. Then, with a trembling breath, he dialed the number. The call was answered immediately. What happened after that felt unreal. Adrian Hale arrived at the hospital within the hour. No entourage, no security detail, no cameras, just a man with worry in his eyes and urgency in his steps. He sat with Ethan, listened to every detail, and without hesitation handled the paperwork, the costs, and everything Ethan could not afford. But more than money, he offered presence, a calm, reassuring presence that felt like a lifeline. In the days that followed, Adrian visited often, asking about Ethan's mother, about Ethan's life, about his dreams, the dreams he had buried beneath years of struggle. Slowly, almost painfully, Ethan opened up. He shared his desire to open a learning center for underprivileged kids, to create a safe space for students who never had the support they needed. He spoke of his wish to build something meaningful, something lasting. Adrian listened without interruption. And when Ethan finished, the billionaire simply said that dreams like his were exactly what the world needed. Dreams that could change generations. Ethan didn't know it then, but that conversation changed everything. Within weeks, Adrian connected him to resources, advisors, and opportunities Ethan never imagined could be within his reach. But he didn't hand Ethan success. He taught him how to build it. He guided him, challenged him, believed in him in ways no one else ever had. Together, they opened the community learning center Ethan had always dreamed of, a place glowing with life, hope, and possibility. Students filled the rooms, parents smiled with relief, and Ethan felt his heart grow lighter each day. But even as the world around him changed, Ethan never forgot the night he made that trembling phone call. The night a wealthy stranger became something far more, proof that kindness, when placed in the right hands, could rebuild shattered lives. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue creating emotional stories that remind the world of hope. Before the ending, please comment below. I believe in kindness and second chances. Ethan's mother eventually recovered. The center thrived, and Ethan's life blossomed in ways he once thought impossible. But the most beautiful part of the journey wasn't the success, the recognition, or the restored stability. It was the simple truth he carried with him every day. Sometimes, life places strangers in our path not to save us, but to remind us that we were never meant to fight alone. And sometimes, a rich stranger doesn't just offer help, they offer belief. And belief can change everything. The end.